Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Velo podcast with me, Mike Levy. Today, I've only got one other person with me, and it is tech editor Josh Ross, because he recently posted his long-term review of the Priority Gemini Smart.Shift gravel bike that uses a 12-speed gearbox, a basically maintenance-free belt instead of a chain, and electronic shifting, which all sounds pretty cool to me. And I know we've kind of touched on this bike before in previous podcasts, Josh, but today we're going to dive in and I'm going to ask you a whole bunch of questions. Everything from like the tech details. We're going to talk about the pros and cons, Josh. And then obviously we're going to end this with who the heck is this bike for and who isn't it for? So in a way, everybody that's listening, you kind of think of this as sort of like a podcast review, or maybe an extension of Josh's review of the Priority Gemini. So if you haven't read the review or watched the video, go to the Velo homepage, check it out, and then come back and listen to the podcast. Josh, thanks for coming on to talk about this bike. It's pretty interesting. I just wanted to tell you something before we get into this. The timing of your review could not have been better. So last weekend, I did a 386-kilometer gravel bike race, and it rained, I would say, 340 of those kilometers, and the roads were, exactly.
That's awful.
In a way, it was like the good kind of awful that we like, you know? Yeah, exactly. But the roads were rolling pretty slow, and my man, my drivetrain, it felt like I had been pedaling with the drivetrain submerged in like molasses and sand. It was brutal. I wiped it down. I lubed it multiple times, but like I could just feel it through my feet. It felt like absolute trash. And I was just thinking, I should read Josh's review.
I mean, that's what this bike is all about. So that's perfect. Or it's one of the things. We'll talk about that more, but it's one of the things it's all about.
Yeah, exactly. So first off, Josh, tell me, who the heck is Priority Cycles and what kind of bikes do they sell?
So Priority, they're actually a company. I've worked with them for like 6 years or something. Like, it's kind of crazy how long I've been riding various Priority bikes. And they're just a small company. I think they're in New York City. They're in New York State for sure. And they're not manufacturing the frames, but the thing about their frames is that they tend to be fairly inexpensive, and they only sell belt drive bikes. So I have a city bike from them that I used to use all the time to ride with my son to school. And then I have reviewed an e-bike from them, like a class 1, like a maxes out at like 20 miles an hour. Just a very casual e-bike. At one point, I had a cruiser bike from them. Also, all belt drives. Just really cool things. And this is the first sort of more performance-oriented bike that I've ever touched of theirs.
Okay, so the first question I have for you, Josh, when I close my eye, when I'm laying in bed at night and I close my eyes and think of Josh Ross, I think of aero frames, and I think of skinny tires pumped up too hard, you know? And
first of all, I'm going to push back on that one 100%. I have a reputation for running ridiculously low pressures. So let's just set that one.
Skinny though, just
skinny though.
Low.
Yes, skinny.
Yeah. So how does someone like that end up reviewing a bike that is, we're going to get into what it's for, but like it's definitely not like what I would call like quote unquote a speed bike, you know?
It's not a speed bike.
Yeah, so why? Tell me.
So it's an interesting thing, and I talk about this a little bit in the review, where I go like, hey, if you want to make this a trek checkpoint, you're going to have a bad day. Like, you're going to ride this and you're not going to like it. And I could, like, so as a reviewer, I try to look for things that are interesting and different, and like there's a story to be told. And that doesn't necessarily mean that every story has to be, like, I don't have to be centered in every story. So this bike is probably not realistically for me, although there could be some uses that I think I could, there are some things I could do with it that I think sort of fit me, but also the ideal buyer is probably not me, but I still think it's a story worth being told.
And it's hella interesting for sure.
Right? It's just like,
Which,
well, I could talk
which is
about
what we want.
right. It's like when I look out in the bikes I'm gonna review, there's how many mid-range carbon framed 45 mil tire clearance bikes that exist, right? How many? There's so it's just like, yeah, right? And then you go, okay, this has a Pinion gearbox, electronic shifting, and a belt drive. Oh, and you can get a titanium frame version.
Good
I'm like,
Lord.
yes, tell me more.
Yeah, Josh, I agree with you. Like back when I was with Pink Bike and reviewing stuff, I think back and like all I really wanted to do was ride interesting things because it made it a lot easier to write about. But then I'm interested in it, and if I'm interested in it, like I'm gonna want to do it. I'm gonna want to do a better job. So that's kind of what I'm picking up from you.
I mean, that's exactly how I feel. It's just like, I mean, the just as a behind the scenes, the idea of writing about it. So, there are bikes that I have ridden that they're just really good. And what do I want to say about them? Like, if you ask me,
So
like,
hard.
what's cool about that bike? And I'm like,
The
well,
paint?
yeah, I mean, the price is like decent. It's not like the best, but it's not expensive. You're like, what do you do? And so it's just so much more interesting for me as a writer to be like, here's this whole story, and I get to explain what opinion drive is. I get to explain like all these things, and like there's something compelling about both doing that and hopefully reading it too.
Yeah, tell the story for sure. Okay, the Gemini Smart.Shift. Give me the bullet points. What do I need to know? What are the talking points of this bike?
Yeah, so it's a metal frame. There's an aluminum version for $34.99, and then there is there's $2,000 more gets you the titanium version, and all of whatever you know all priority bikes are belt drive. So it's still a belt drive, which is it's
You
a
can't
Gates car.
get it with the chain? No chain option?
No chain available.
Okay.
No, and again, nothing that Priority sells would have a chain, but this is no exception. So the other bullet point is that it is a Pinion C.12 gearbox, and so you could technically have a bike that had that gearbox and used a chain, but most of the time you're going to see it with a belt drive, and that's the case here too. And so
how many
again.
speeds?
Bullet points are that it's this gearbox, it's electronic shifting, it is a metal frame, it has a belt drive, and yes, to answer your question that I talked over, it is 12 speeds.
What are you using to shift this thing?
So it's TRP levers, and like I said, it's electronic, and I don't know if you could shift it mechanically, but it doesn't matter. This is electronic. And there is, so as I said in the review, that does mean there's a battery, but the battery in this lasts longer than I think is typical for electronic shifting.
There's a battery in the gearbox, or the battery in the shifters?
There is a battery in the frame. So you actually plug, yeah, in the frame. So like Shimano, and you actually plug in the frame. So unlike Shimano, it's not like there's a cord that comes out near the head tube, and you actually plug it in right there.
Okay. And 600% range, which sounds absolutely ridiculous. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so the thing, it is 12 speed, but the range is wider than a I mean, I tend to look at this through the lens of SRAM. So if you're looking at an Explorer group, which is typically 40 tooth chainring, and then a 10 to 44 cassette, you have greater range at the top end, so easier gears. And then one of the big differences about this is that the shifts are there's no, normally on a cassette it's tighter on one side and then looser at the top where it's easier. So this is even steps between gears all the time.
Okay, so I have a question about that. Um, there are definitely riders that don't really care too much about the jumps between gears, and there are riders that do. Myself, I have a one by setup with a big Eagle cassette on the back. I really feel jumps between those gears. You're obviously familiar with that too, and that's how it has to be to get the range that I need to ride the one by. So it is what it is. But how does that feel like when you're riding the bike and every jump is exactly the same? Are you shifting differently, or is anything like how do the legs feel? Tell me about it.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think it's that big a
Not
deal,
even
really.
noticeable.
So first of all, on a cassette, you could, in theory, have the same range, but even jumps. They just don't
Yeah.
because they expect you to use certain gears more, and you need tighter cadence there. Um, so nobody does that. But in this case, it's 17.7% each shift, and it's not like it's not as fast or as smooth as SRAM or Shimano. Like it's not like a imperceptible shift that you can sometimes get on those group sets. And so it already sort of is an event to shift. And I just don't know that it matters all that much to that the shifts are even. I mean, it's a selling point because you don't have to really, especially if you're loaded up, you don't have to. There's no mental math involved in it. You just sort of shift and it's fine. But realistically, from a rider perspective, I don't know how much it actually matters.
Okay. Let's talk about the shifting a little bit. Modern Shimano and SRAM drivetrains, you could basically shift those like a drunk gorilla. Like, yeah, you, you don't have to even like. You and I both remember shifting front derailleurs, especially, but just shifting in general, where it had to back off, and think about things in anticipation. But nowadays, modern drivetrains, you just bang, bang, bang. Uh, how does the pinion shifting compare to that?
Well, so there's no chain to drop, so you don't have to worry about that. Um, yeah, it is a plus. Hilariously, I will say on a tangent that SRAM actually called me old recently. They were like, I was like, you don't want to. I basically described the type of shifting where you're like, you don't do it, right? You don't just
Yeah,
shift the front chainring whenever. And they were like, yeah, people that are a little bit older, they sort of hold on to those ideas.
yeah,
I was
exactly.
like, thanks, SRAM. But
They're not wrong.
yeah. But regardless, the idea, can you bang it between gears? Yeah, you totally can. And I think I have seen some pushback just in the overall, review space. People will say that the Pinion gearboxes don't shift well under load. I have not found that. I found that it shifts just fine under load, but it is never the shifting experience of SRAM or Shimano. It is always, you can hear it. It's quite loud. You hear it move, and then it's just a little bit slower and a little bit like the experience is not quite the same of shifting a cassette, but there is a like clunk into gear in a way that is, it's just like there are times you can shift a Shimano bike and you're like, wait, did I shift? And you're not going to get that here.
Yeah, it sounds a lot better than the last pinion gearbox I used, which was friggin' like 7 years ago or something, maybe, where you basically had to like get off the bike and like ask it to shift sometimes.
Yeah, it's not like that at all. It when you press the button, it shifts 100% of the
Okay.
time, which just for people listening and reading my reviews, that's sort of my baseline. I always tell companies like, I don't care what your thing does. If I push that button and it doesn't shift, we have a problem.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and that's not the case. It like it shifts all the time when you want it to do it, and pretty much under any situation that you would shift a bike, you can shift this bike. It is always going to be a little bit less, I don't know, maybe less refined is a good way to say it, although I don't even know if that's true. It's just a different experience than a modern good like Shimano Osram style bike.
Yeah. I think that is actually a really good point. I remember when I wrote a review of a Zero Road with Gearbox, and they definitely pushed back a little bit, and they basically described it exactly like how you described it. It's an entirely different transmission and an entirely different system. Like it's never going to feel the same. It's a different experience. And I think, back then I looked at it and I really felt strongly that it was a drawback back then. It sounds like it's definitely 1,000 times faster and easier shifting than it used to be. And also in this use case on a gravel bike, it's a very different world than on a mountain bike. And it's probably just fine, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you have to, you are giving up something in a way, but also you're gaining a lot, which is, again, one of the reasons that I looked at this bike, or the sort of the angle that I took with this bike, is that, yes, if your goal, I know that there are people, road cyclists especially, you're like, that thing, I better hear nothing. The bike is silent, and when I shift it just effortlessly, quietly, silently moves. That's not this experience, but you gain something for that.
What you gain, Josh?
Yes, and what you gain for that is there's the setup. What you gain is essentially no maintenance. There is like nothing. That ride that you did where you can just hear your drivetrain just crying. That just doesn't exist.
Dude, my chain. I've been cleaning my bike. Look at the dust coming off of the chain. I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but like there's a dust cloud.
Yeah.
I've been cleaning my bike for 3 days.
Yeah. So
okay, it's just perfectly silent. Like there's no belt noise. There's no like you don't have to lube anything.
Yeah, you don't have to lube anything. There's no lubing required. The Gates carbon belt lasts like I don't know forever. It's like I want to say 9,000 kilometers. It's something like crazy long. And the actual shifting is sealed inside of this unit, and you have to change the gearbox oil every, like a car or something, just every so often, not very often.
Okay. This sounds like it would be ideal for someone who does a lot of miles in a lot of shit weather. And I don't necessarily, like, honestly, when I first saw the bike, in my mind, I'm like, oh, that would make a great commuting bike. But then I read your review and I watched the video, and it sounds like there's a world where this could definitely be someone's gravel bike as well.
So there's a guy, I don't remember his name, but he has one of these bikes, and he's off in like, I don't know, Mongolia or something, and he is just riding across the freaking like everything, and you can carry. It's pretty easy to carry an extra belt drive with you if in case you needed it, and but he just like. You never have to think about anything, and there are people that use it in that way. Also, if you were to drop this bike, there's no derailleur to bend, or brake or hang. Like there's nothing. You could drop it, and it's pretty protected. So there you can get into crazy adventures with this bike.
It almost sounds like. Do you remember Roll Off? I'm sure they're still around.
Yeah,
Roll Off is
I think
definitely still around. Yeah. It almost sounds like the same sort of use case, possibly, as those things.
I think it definitely is, and I think there are some of those drawbacks. I'm not super familiar with roll off, I should say, but
me neither.
But roll off they are heavier, and that still exists here. That's the one thing about this bike where I'm like, yeah, it is heavy.
How heavy is the bike, and what is it? Does that weight? Does you feel that weight when you ride the bike? Because that's not always the case, depending on what you're doing.
Yeah, so it's 11.5 kilograms, and I know in mountain bike world that's maybe not so bad, but it's heavy, and
yeah,
the party line is that if you ask Priority or Pinion about this, they're like, oh, but it's down low. And I'm like, yeah, but it's still there. It's still there. You still feel it. And you do feel it. I'm not going to try to pretend that you don't feel it. And that was part of the review, is that as many things as I like about this bike, it is not a lightweight bike, and you can feel that weight. However, I think the use case, it's sort of irrelevant. It's like in the same way that bikes that are just bikes that are designed to go long distances and be maintenance free. They're just generally heavier. They just are. And
They have to be. Yeah.
yeah, they just have to be. And you're not trying to take advantage of that decisive moment on the small rise after, at 3/4 of the way through the race, right? You're just not. You're not exploding up that hill to beat the competition. You are going the long haul, and it's okay that it's a little bit heavier.
Yeah, it's if you're the kind of person who wants to beat your friends to the stop sign kind of person, probably not the bike, but you're going to keep pedaling for 35 hours across some country that you snuck into or something. Like this, it sounds a bit more like it. What was the ride experience like? Like you mentioned, it was definitely you could feel that weight. The shifting is a bit better, but like, what type of rides did you do on the bike? And I mean, you've done those same rides on lots of other bikes, so maybe give me some comparisons.
Um, One thing that, and this is not about the Pinion, but I don't know about you, but in my world, almost every bike I've ever owned or ridden in my life has like pretty massive toe overlap. I ride a 54 and I ride racy
It'd be
bikes
sketch.
and they just
Yeah.
all have toe overlap. And so to ride this bike with no toe overlap, just like none, it's like, yeah, it's nice. And
That's a selling feature for you.
yeah. I mean, I generally when I had a custom bike built, the guys in Colombia, the Scarab bike, they were like, "Well, we don't want you to have toe overlap." It was sort of a big thing for them because I was trying to, with that bike, I was take their all road and put bigger tires on it and make it a gravel bike. And they were like, "Well, you're gonna have a toe overlap, and we don't like to do that." And I'm like, "It just doesn't matter because I always have toe overlap." But then when you ride a bike without toe overlap, you're like, "Oh, damn, this is actually really nice." So I don't know I have met people, and maybe you're that person that are like, this is a huge selling feature to them. To me, I sort of just accept that there is to overlap in this, but then when it's not there, it is damn nice. So that was a big thing that I took. Like when I rode this bike right away, I'm like, oh my God, I'm on single track and I can actually make the turn without like being weird or unclipping just because I
Or
can't
like
pedal.
ratchet or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right.
But
What
other
is the
than that,
handling?
there's a sort of smoothness to it. I feel like exists, and I think actually the weight in some ways plays into that because it really damps everything. To just like you've got a fairly heavy bike, you've got this thing with fluid in it that's at the bottom of the bike, and then there's a belt drive, and there's no chain bounce or anything like that. So there's definitely a fluidity to the bike that I noticed. Um, I generally, what I would say about it, it is a sit down and pedal, and like we've talked about, it's just a sit down and pedal and go kind of bike, and that's the ride experience.
Okay. It's almost like a. I know it's not an actual mass damper because it doesn't do the same thing, but it's like a mass dampers in mountain bike world are the big rage right now. It's like you have this big damper on the bottom of the bike that just kind of smooths out all the sharpness of the undulations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Tell me about the handling. Is this something that you could like really charge a downhill on because it is a gravel bike, or is it lean more towards the road side of things? Where's it fall?
So the handling, the numbers sort of split the difference between a mountain bike and a gravel bike, i.e., it's not the head angle is not that slack, but it's fairly long, and we just talked about that there's no toe overlap for me. But to your question, the thing is, I'm never a great descender, and I
But Josh, but that's exactly. I think this is an exact use case scenario though. Like you admit, like you're not super confident descender. A bike like this, it's heavier. It sounds like it should be more stable. So my question would be like, did you have more confidence than usual on it? Like, is that a big plus for you on this bike?
Well, so I'm looking at the numbers right now, and still a 70-degree head tube angle. Um, so it's not like this slacked out bike. It just is long, I think is where is the thing. So was I super confident on it? Yeah, I wouldn't say that. This is not the bike where I'm like, oh my God, I felt like so confident descending on this bike. But it's not a road bike. At the same time, I love the TRP hood shape. This is like and so for me, when I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get aero and I'm gonna hold the tops of those hoods and I'm just gonna go. I especially like it on fairly flat surfaces. It feels really good. I was like impressed because if you walk up to it and you sort of like pick it up or touch it and you're like, oh, this isn't a performance bike. And we've talked about that in a couple different ways that it's maybe not a performance bike. But when you ask it to be a performance bike, it really is. It performs quite well. And maybe the climbing experience is just, again, you have to just sort of divorce. If your idea is you're sprinting to the stop sign up the hill to beat your friends, you're probably not going to do that. Like, this isn't the bike. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't feel peppy and fast. It's just more of it's like sweet spot sort of riding where you just do it for a long time.
Hmm. Hmm. It, it sounds to me like it rides sort of like, I know it doesn't have light wheels on it, but it rides like, it's got like normal wheels, but it's a heavy bike. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't ride like a bike with heavy wheels that feels like it rolls slow. Once you get this thing up to speed, you just keep trucking along, carry some
Yeah,
momentum,
I
and you'll
actually
be
think
good.
that's a great way to describe it. I still didn't really answer your question of did it make me a single track descender? No, it did not. But
Not so much. Okay.
I can't do everything.
Yeah, well, at least you didn't have to lube the chain, so there's
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I guess we should come close to wrapping this thing up and tell me the ideal sort of ride or maybe rider that you see on this bike. And I think we've really outlined it, but just underline it for me again. Like, who isn't this thing for?
Well, so it's interesting because as we talk about it now, we're sort of focusing on it from a performance perspective, and I think that aspect exists, and so you could be, your ride that you just did recently, I think would be perfect for this bike, quite honestly. However, I don't think that is a realistic market share for any company. Like, so yes, you could do that with this bike. And if you are the tens of people that are looking at that or needing that, then this will do it. But the person I really think that this bike would be cool for is if you commute all the time. And, you commute through the winter, you commute through the summer, and you just don't want to deal with, like, you just want your bike to work. And then during the summer, you're like, hey, you know what? A few times a year, I'm going to load this bike up and I'm going to go bike packing with it because that big gear range works really well for, if you're carrying more weight, you have more range. And I feel like that really leans into, and maybe that's a more casual rider. Maybe, I don't know how you would describe that exactly in terms of how dedicated people are in that aspect, but it's just a bike you don't have to think about, and then you can actually do a lot with it. And I will say, if you were like, oh, you know what? I see there's this cool gravel race that's like near me, and it's a century, it's a double century, like, 100 to 200 miles, that kind of thing. You could put 50 mil tires on this thing, and it's very capable. You might not be contesting for the podium, but very few people are contesting for the podium anyway. And this bike will not hold you back. So,
Interesting. Interesting. Versatile. Would you ever consider the titanium one? Because that's the cool one.
that is the cool one. So the only reason I didn't review the titanium one is because, $2,000 for what is essentially the same bike is kind of a big ask, and so we wanted to which one would be more accessible to more people. Um But that said, if I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, titanium's cool.
I know, right? And dude, in a lot of ways, people that are buying this bike, I don't think this bike falls into like the typical buying cycle that a lot of like average performance riders might stick to. Like this might be the kind of bike that you buy and you're literally going to have for 15, 20 or more years. And in that case, not that I'm trying to upsell people on the titanium frame, but in that case, like you spread it over that amount of time and it's like, oh, maybe I do want something like it's not about lighter, to be honest, because who gives a shit? It's heavy regardless, but more special, more mine, more yours, more personal.
I mean, that is a very good point. I was struggling to see actually, I'm gonna just thank you here because I was honestly struggling to see a good, like, why would I tell someone to upgrade to the titanium? And I mean, the reality is it's for vibes, for the vibes. Why do you upgrade?
Yes.
Because it's titanium.
Yes.
You're not
Yeah.
gaining a performance advantage. But I do agree with you that this is a bike that could last for a long time. So the idea of having it last and then your that extra money has spread out over a long time, I do think is kind of a cool thing.
Yeah. Okay. And one last thing that I just thought of, I think that if you personally were going to buy a titanium Gemini Smart.Shift bicycle, you would buy the frame. So I want to put you on the spot here, and I would like to know how you might build that up.
Okay, so you can't buy this frame just as a frame
Oh
set.
shit! Really?
No, yeah, you can't. But well, because everything is kind of integrated, like, right, if you
Oh
think about it.
yeah. I guess that
Um,
makes sense.
But that said, okay, the wheels are regular wheels. There's no like, you don't need special wheels for this. They have it set up with like a single speed setup basically. But it just has a through axle and you could swap out different wheels. So the question I think is there's still a validity to this. If I had this bike and it was mine long term, how would I change it out? I'm gonna say I probably would not touch the wheels, quite honestly, because
Really?
yeah, it's like, why do you want to upgrade wheels? You want to upgrade wheels like for aero, for maybe wider, especially on
Yeah.
a road bike. It's good to go a wider wheel, and like lightness. You want a lighter wheel, but none of that really makes sense on this bike. These are wheels that I think can take a beating and just let them be. I would change the saddle. That's pretty obvious. It comes with a cheap saddle. It's a
Yeah. Fair enough.
WTB thing, and I say that because a lot of bikes that I review these days, modern high-end bikes, I don't even feel the need to change the saddle quite often. But on this one, I definitely would. The big thing that I would want to change immediately would be the handlebars. I hate the handlebars that are on this thing.
How
And
come?
when I first got it, I was like, is there a problem? I like reached down to grab. They don't like curl as much as they should. So like the drops are like this weird thing. And
Oh,
then
like the drops are like open instead of
yeah, they're like open
closed.
and it's still at quite a steep angle when it ends. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what the hell's going on here. And then it's wide. Although I actually, for some reason, took a little bit less, wide handlebars on small bikes is sort of my soapbox over the last year or so. So more and more become my thing where I'm like, just stop. But I
Yeah.
actually didn't like immediately despise how wide the handlebars are, but given time, I would definitely change that. And since I'm changing the handlebars anyway because I hate the shape of them, I would go to something narrower, like probably a 40, and then just a good shape to the drops. And I probably would just keep cheap aluminum bars. I don't feel like this is the bike where you need to throw all the carbon and all the fancy, like,
Who
you
are
just
you?
want to.
What
Yeah.
is happening?
I know, right? Who am I? But it's just, this bike it's so. I mean, if it was me, I would use it for the race. I don't commute or bike pack, so I would use it for the race that you were talking about.
I wish I had it.
Right? It was just, you don't have to think about it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, interesting. Well, that's been that has been a deep dive on the Priority Gemini Smart.Shift. Thanks, Josh. Everybody that's listened to this, like I said at the start, if you haven't read Josh's review or watched his video, go to the Velo website and check it out and let us know what you think in the comments under this video on the YouTube. And yeah, thanks, Josh. And I guess you're going to go for a ride on your, I can't believe I'm saying this, on your Gearbox gravel bike maybe later today. Who knew?
Well, I have another titanium, the lightest titanium road bike in the world is coming to me, so maybe I'll take that one out.
Oh, see, the duality of Josh.
That's right. Don't let me get pigeonholed. That's what I'm leaving everyone with.
Exactly. All right, everybody. We will see you next episode.